Hello and welcome, I'm Jay.
And I'm Robbie.
And you're joining us for episode 22 of Generations Apart, the podcast where we talk about gaming and technology across the generations, sharing our perspectives on the past and our excitement for the future. On today's episode, we're talking all about gaming showcases, specifically unpacking what Xbox, PlayStation and Summer Game Fest had to offer. So, let's start at the very beginning. We're going to start with the PlayStation Showcase first of all. Robbie, we watched this one separately. We watched them all separately just because of your travels and various inconveniences over the last few weeks. What was your sort of first impressions, I guess, of the PlayStation Showcase?
So there were some good games announced. I have to say, for my impression of all of them is, I have to say I'm a bit ignorant of these events. This is the first year I've really sat down and watched all of the launch events. And I was quite surprised at how many games are actually announced at these events. So I suppose I was a bit naive going into all of them initially. I wasn't expecting this many games, and they literally just reel them one after another. And it can be quite overwhelming to distinguish the different games. And that was the same with all of them. But the PlayStation one I thought was quite good. It was a mix of some of the newer games, the exclusives, and then they talked a bit about the hardware at the end, which was also quite a few exciting announcements around that side as well.
Yeah.
We'll get into the comparison of the other ones. I wasn't as, thrilled about the... I have to say, I watched it in the wrong order as well, behind the curtain a little bit. So I watched the Xbox one, then the PlayStation one. But yeah, we'll compare later. But I wasn't, blown away by some of the games in the PlayStation one as I was with some of the Xbox ones.
Yeah, we can kind of rank them at the end and see where we would stack them. And it's interesting your point around having not watched these before. So typically in years gone by, and it's deteriorated since COVID, unfortunately, we used to have E3, which was this huge in-person event in America where gamers and media would gather, kind of see these games, test them, play them, and then you'd have these showcase events that were done in the grand sort of halls to really bring these to life. And typically Xbox, PlayStation and Nintendo would all have one on sort of separate dates. And there'd always be this kind of competition to see who would go first, and did someone set the standard for the next one? And more often than not, to be honest, PlayStation typically would come out on top.
Really?
And then you've got the other gaming companies around it. So EA for a long time used to do one, and then they kind of moved away from E3. They're one of the first really to set that trend. You had like Ubisoft, amongst others. Blizzard used to do them, and Bethesda. And obviously things have changed over the years. During COVID, of course, E3 went away. It became a digital event. And then a lot of the gaming companies basically decided to withdraw, and they realised that actually they didn't need to spend thousands and thousands of pounds on exhibition space and preparing for this thing in an auditorium and running the risk of a live event going wrong. Actually, they could create these pre-recorded, perfected showcases that just get streamed online, and they get just as good an audience and just as good an interest without all of the pressure and the cost that goes with the E3 event, which is a real shame if you're in the industry. I never got to go to an E3. It's way too expensive being in the UK.
Yeah.
But I think it's one of those things where, as a result now, I personally felt like all the showcases lacked a little bit of magic.
Yeah.
Now, Summer Game Fest is slightly different because that was done in front of a live audience. We can talk about that. But the other two, so Xbox and PlayStation, were just these kind of reel after reel, a bit like the Apple Developer Conference we talked about last week, pre-recorded, pre-prepared, trimmed and tailored. And it's a shame because you miss the crowd reaction. I remember watching things like Gears of War,
hearing like the gasps or even, and the claps and all that.
Yeah, or even most recently, more recently, I guess Cyberpunk, when Keanu Reeves came out and announced it, and everyone was like, "Wow, Keanu Reeves in the auditorium." That's kind of something to get excited about, and you're almost led by the reaction of the room to some degree. Especially like you said, if you're a little bit like I'll say uneducated, but I don't mean that in an insulting way. In terms of what's going on in this space, you could watch one of those events, and if the crowd went mad, you'd go, "This is probably a big deal."
Yeah.
Whereas now, it's quite hard to watch some of this stuff and get excited unless you know the franchises involved. And my takeaway from a lot of these events now, and as I'm getting older, it's more this realization, I think, that a lot of modern games aren't necessarily tailored or aimed at me.
Yeah.
And there was a few things in there that I did get excited about, but they tend to be sort of pulling on nostalgia for me, and we'll talk about that as we unpack them. So let's start with the PlayStation one. I'm not going to go in the order that the games were necessarily presented. I'm using IGN as a resource here, so shout out to IGN for some great coverage.
We'll include
just to
the
kind
link.
of summarise the events. So they've obviously led here with PlayStation with what PlayStation actually finished with, which was the in-depth look at Spider-Man 2, the reveal of Kraven the Hunter, Spider-Man kind of battling with the Venom suit and the personality changes there, and then that huge chase sequence where they were after the lizard. I have to say, having thoroughly enjoyed Spider-Man on the PS4 and then the follow-up Miles Morales, a shorter game that came at PS5 launch, I am completely in on this, 100% sold. I think they've said that the map is twice the size of the previous one. I don't know how they do that because it's meant to be New York. Not double the size of New York, but I think they're opening up areas and maybe removing some of the condensed landscape that they've done to make it fit on a PS4. We've got new moves, new characters. They've confirmed that Venom isn't Eddie Brock in this universe. So we don't know who is wearing the Venom suit to become Venom. So yeah, really excited for that one. Didn't really need selling on it. It was nice that they did an in-depth and showed some proper gameplay. But I think most people who played the previous ones are just all in on that one regardless. So were you similar?
Yeah, so I don't have a PlayStation 5, but if ever there was a reason to get one, I think it's the Spider-Man games, the previous one and this one. It looked really, really good. The graphics look amazing. I like the gameplay mechanics of switching characters. I think that's a really cool idea. Yeah, and the storyline looked quite good as well. I loved that little playthrough that they did, kind of showing you, even the buttons that were appearing and the little icons where you would swing your webs and things like that. So it was proper gameplay, and yeah, I really enjoyed that.
What's interesting is the Spider-Man on the PS4 took a different direction with some of the characters or the way they were developed, and has taken a bit of freedom and liberty with the stories. So I'm quite interested to see what they do with Venom. I'm interested to see how the the lizard develops as a character in this. And just telling the story of the symbiote suit in general will be good. And Kraven is not a character that gets a lot of, hasn't been in the movies yet.
Yeah. I hadn't heard of him before.
Kind of crazy now. I remember him from the cartoons back in the day in the 90s, but that's about the only knowledge or memory I've got. I mean, I don't really read the comics, so that's not a big deal for me. So there's some really interesting stuff potentially in this. One thing I was going to say to your point about switching characters, I'll be interested to see how that manifests. I don't think it's going to be like GTA 5 where you just decide to change.
You think?
And go off and do something different. I don't know. Part of me wonders whether that's going to be kind of in the moment when they're doing their story. That was very much a pre-scripted event, wasn't it? And they were sort of changing character. Either, I wonder if it's at a trigger point where you need to change to keep the flow of the action sequence going. They didn't show it in open play. Doesn't mean it won't exist, but I'm just curious as to how that's going to work. Will it be as fluid, or will it be kind of based on the story beats and there'll only be certain opportunities where that kind of swapping is happening, or will you be kind of forced from one to another as the story plays out? It would be quite compelling if they both got their own kind of stories and unlockable missions and things to do around New York when you're not following the story.
That's what I was going to say, because I think in GTA when they do that, it's a good way of mixing up so you don't get bored with the same main storyline of the main character. You can switch it up, and because I think the way they might be doing it is I really hope they do have it open world switching characters, because the Venom characters is quite an interesting character to play if you want to do a bit more of the darker stuff, as opposed to maybe the more kind of general Spider-Man things that you would typically do.
Do you mean black suit Spider-Man rather than Venom?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah. I was going to say, because Venom obviously, we don't know how that's going to manifest yet. We know that we're going to have Peter Parker in the black suit from somewhere for somehow. Because again, they've changed, that story's changed a few times. Back in the early comics, and we're getting way too much into the MCU here, but the symbiote is like an alien life form that comes from outer space. Whereas I think it was like an Ultimate Spider-Man where they kind of pivoted the universe and they made a load of changes to backstories. It was actually developed in a lab on planet Earth.
Oh, right.
By researchers trying to cure cancer. So they kind of twisted the backstory for the purposes of that universe. So it'd be interesting to see whether they go for the more traditional outer space or whether they go for something grown in a lab or something entirely different. Well, they're changing the character that's going to be Venom. So the one thing that's just occurred to me, and we'll move on from it in a moment, but they mentioned something in that footage. There's a throwaway line of dialogue where they're chasing the lizard, and Peter Parker says that Harry is dying. He could be the cure.
Mm.
It makes me wonder, because Harry Osborn traditionally in the comics becomes a Green Goblin V2.
Yeah.
I wonder whether actually, in an attempt to cure him, he's going to take on the black suit and become Venom. So maybe the Venom in that universe ends up becoming Harry Osborn.
Interesting.
Just a thought. Anyway, we're getting too Marvel and not enough gaming, so let's move on from Spider-Man. The next big announcement that got my attention, and it won't be a surprise to you, was the Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater remake that was announced, or Metal Gear Solid Delta, as they've called it. Now, you texted me as you were watching it and said, "Have you seen the Metal Gear announcement?" Of course, which I replied, "Yeah."
Of course.
But it's not what I wanted, if I'm honest. And there's a couple of reservations I've got with this. And there's a couple of good things. So first of all, I didn't really like Snake Eater as much as the other games back in the day. So I much prefer Metal Gear Solid, the first one on the PlayStation, and then Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty on the PS2. Those are kind of my two favourite ones in the franchise. Everything that followed I enjoyed, but never really quite captured me in the way that those first two did. And Snake Eater is not one that I particularly played a lot of. Played it with a friend, and he played it through to completion. And I watched, so I've seen the story, I've seen it unravel, but I didn't really get involved in that one and play it as much. So it was a bit disappointing, and I don't know why they've chosen to go to that game. There's reasons probably, but I would have liked them to have gone to the start of that series and done Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
And then built from there. Maybe if this is successful, it'll get them to go and do that. And maybe there's other reasons why this was the easier one to go for. But I was a bit disappointed it was this version. I think it is generally considered to be one of the better titles, though. So although it's not my favourite, it's generally critically considered to be one of the better Metal Gears or one of the best Metal Gears.
Okay.
So that might well be the reason they've done it. The other thing that disappointed me is that, and understandably, Kojima is not involved.
So, I didn't know that.
Well, so Kojima and Konami split unceremoniously at the end of the development of Metal Gear Solid 5, and Metal Gear Solid 5 is an unfinished game. So if you play it all the way through, the story kind of ends abruptly and doesn't quite feel complete. And there's a general theory that that's because basically it was rushed to completion in order to get this split done because it become unworkable. So Kojima's not involved because he's now off doing his own thing with his own studio.
With Apple.
So this is being produced by Konami, and there'll be a third party. I don't think they've announced who's doing it yet, but it'll be a third party that's developing this. So
okay.
But one saving grace is that apparently they are using all of the original audio, which will please fans because they're keeping all the same.
You're going to remaster it though, surely.
I assume they'll remaster it, but they're using all the original dialogue, and none of it's being re-recorded, which is interesting. So they're going to that is going to restrict them to an extent as to what they can do with this remake. But they're using all the original dialogue. Again, this is a really nerdy thing that only a gamer who's a massive fan of Metal Gear will kind of care about. That Metal Gear Solid 5, when Kojima was kind of signing off, he recast Solid Snake, the voice actor, which is a guy called David Hayter. And he recast him for Kiefer Sutherland, who at the time was kind of on his high on 24 and all this kind of stuff. And the fans were like, "Why have you recast him?" And to this date, no one really understands it. Even David Hayter has been on Twitter and said various things about this in the past. Whether it was Kojima just trying to go out on a bang with a big Hollywood star, because of course ever since then he's moved into using real celebrities for a lot of his games. So yeah, I don't know. I wasn't thrilled. They also announced alongside it the Metal Gear Solid Collection, which was coming to PS5, which was, I think it's porting existing ports or remasters of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, weirdly enough. So you can buy the collection and play the old version of a game that you're going to wait for them to remake. And that's
as in like with the old PS1 style graphics and everything.
PS1 Metal Gear and then PS2 for Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. So they're like But they're the I assume they're the missed with the HD remasters that were done years ago for 2 and 3 at least. 1 never had that treatment. 1's quite unplayable, to be honest, now, which is why I was desperate for them to remaster that, because it's got a great story, but it's a quite a challenging game to play. It's also much shorter and would require a lot less development in terms of the environments, which is again why it surprised me that, you know, if you're going to dip your toe back in and remaster from this game collection, why would you go for one of the bigger, more challenging environments? But anyway, so
might be popularity,
that's coming.
as you say. You mentioned that it is highly regarded, this game, even though it might not be your favorite.
No, it's very well thought of. And interestingly, there's 2 versions of it as well. So, as there was with Metal Gear Solid 2, there was a Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty and then Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance, which was the full Sons of Liberty game and a few extra bells and whistles and quirky game modes, including a Tony Hawk style skate event you could do on Big Shell, which was the environment in that game. And then Metal Gear Solid 3 got something similar. So Snake Eater was then followed up with Subsistence. But that did way more than the version did on the second game. This actually completely changed the camera fundamental. So Metal Gear always had this quite kind of tank-like control scheme. And at the time, games like Splinter Cell were kind of making waves, doing fantastic things with their graphics and the gameplay. And it was very much a third-person, over the shoulder with a fluid camera. So Subsistence completely added a new camera mode into Metal Gear Solid 3, allowing you to play it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Which was completely new to that series. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where they go with it. I thought it was a mixed reaction for me. I'm intrigued. There was no release date. Could be years away. Probably is years away at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops and what it looks like as they start to bring it to fruition. But it wasn't what I would have liked if I could have chosen my perfect Metal Gear Solid announcement.
Yeah.
I'd also like to know more about the movie, but that's a separate conversation altogether.
There's a movie? Yeah, we'll get into that.
Jason Vogt-Roberts, the guy who directed Kong, has been attached to it for several years, as well as what is the actor's name who plays Bo in Star Wars, and he's very famous at this point, and his
Jason
name
Isaac?
is completely... Sorry?
Is it Jason Isaac?
Yes. He's been attached to it for several years as Snake, but we've heard nothing for ages.
Nice.
So don't know where that's going, if it'll ever get released. So let's move past Metal Gear and Spider-Man. So those are the 2 things actually for me, as a nostalgic kind of gamer.
Jason Isaac.
Isaac, sorry.
No, it's not Jason Isaac. It's someone else. I'm completely... Oscar Isaac. That's the one.
There we go. So those are the 2 games that I think for me were most interesting because they were playing on sequels and stories and franchises that I loved. IGN then said the next biggest thing in their report, at least, was the hardware, which came at the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
You touched on this. It was just before the Spider-Man deep dive. So do you want to talk about the two bits of tech that PlayStation teased?
There's 3
at the end?
There's 3.
Was there 3?
Yeah, there was 3. So
what was the third one that I missed? Okay, go on.
Oh no, sorry, I'm lying. There's 2. I'm mixing up. See, I watched them all two at the same time. No, you're right. There is only 2. There is the 8-inch streaming device is one of the first hardwares, which is the it looks like the PS5 controller, the DualSense controller, split in half and with a screen in between. An 8-inch HD screen, I noted down, so it's HD, nothing wild in terms of specs, I don't think, but it's streaming only, which I think is a little bit disappointing. I'm personally disappointed about that because they've got so much experience with like the PSPs and the other handhelds that they did a while back, and to have a streaming only device, I wonder how much it'll cost. I think we've mentioned it a couple of times on the previous episodes when we did about handhelds, modern handhelds anyway.
It was just a rumour back then, but yeah, we did touch on it very briefly in that episode.
I mean, it looks good, and if it's supposed to have all of the same tech that's in the controllers as well, which I guess is really impressive, with the adaptive triggers and the haptics and the feedback. So that's really cool, but it is a shame that I think it's streaming and it's only your own library, so it's an add-on to your PS5. It's not like a standalone console. I guess it's
which presumably is really only going to work I think it only works in your house as well. I don't think it even works if you're connecting it to the internet somewhere else. It does specifically say in there, I mean, we don't know much about this, so it's codename Project Q, as you rightly called out, 8-inch HD screen, all the buttons and features of the DualSense, which is odd because the one thing that is very obviously missing is the touchpad.
Yeah,
that sits smack bang in the middle of the controller. So is it a touch screen?
that's a
Doesn't
good
say
question.
that it is.
Might be a touch
Or
screen.
have they put that somewhere else? And if so, where is it? Is it on the back? Could be on the back.
Could be on the back.
No release date was given. It does say here that it effectively streams games from your PlayStation using Wi-Fi. It doesn't say home Wi-Fi. So maybe you can play it from somewhere else over Wi-Fi. I know remote play can theoretically be accessed outside of your home network. I wouldn't imagine the experience would be great, especially not in this country where the Wi-Fi can be patchy at best.
That would be even more disappointing if it's not. You couldn't even like.
I mean, a lot of people have joked that it's basically the Wii U because that's what the Wii U did, isn't it? The Wii U was
LAN only.
Less, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it works. I've played remote play and it does work quite nicely, but you can do it on an iPad, you can do it on an iPhone. You can buy that Backbone controller, which is all PlayStation officially branded, slap your phone in the middle, and you've basically got this device. So I don't know what it's going to charge, what they're going to charge for it, because realistically,
it has to be cheap, surely.
Well, yeah. So, it's a question for you then. Assuming you had, let's theoretically pretend you've got a PS5.
Yeah.
What would be a price that you would justify, bearing in mind that the controllers at either end of this screen are typically sold for around $69.99 at the moment. So you've got £70 of the controller there. How much extra are you paying for that display that they're slapping in the middle and whatever else is then required to connect? Which presumably only a Wi-Fi controller.
It'd have to be sub 200, definitely. Like less than £200 for sure.
Yeah.
I would be hoping around the 150 mark. I know it's not going to be, but around that would make sense to me.
It's not unreasonable, is it? I mean, I would say the same. I think if it was around 150, I think my kind of nerdy
collectible
intrigue would probably get the better of me. I'd probably end up buying one for 150 quid. Just because I'd justify it to myself as maybe extending the use of the console by going into other rooms of the house or up into the bedroom and being able to sit and play it without any real effort. I mean, I could absolutely achieve that already with the combination of device I've just mentioned. But for 150, I might be tempted. More than that, I'd be really struggling to justify. I mean, if it's £200, you're not a million miles off a Switch.
True.
And you're not getting anything new for that. You're just getting hardware that plays what you've already got. I think it's a really interesting idea, and I'll be intrigued to see what it costs and how it sells. Because I like you said, I just can't see how you're selling that. I mean, basically, if the components are a Switch, it's not a million miles off a Switch, is it?
No,
it doesn't have to do as much as a Switch even. So it's got to be under that cost, surely.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait and see. I'm excited. I'm eager to see how much it'll cost once it's announced.
I think if that console, even if that console could somehow play your PS5 games at HD only, but you could take them on the go, that'd be a really compelling idea. This is the portable version of this super powerhouse you've got at home. I don't think people would mind that too much. It's a bit like the Stream Deck in many ways, isn't it? Play your Steam games on your big PC rig at home.
Yeah.
Or, if you're happy, take a lower fidelity version on the road and have the freedom to play wherever. But this doesn't do that.
No, I know.
So
that's why
really
it doesn't make sense to me.
Really interesting sell.
Well, I know we touched on it in a previous episode as well, but Logitech did something similar where they've got a streaming only device. It connects to all the different services, not just PS Now or anything. But again, that didn't sell very well neither because it was like £280. And at that point, you could just get like a Switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that was announced, and we'll just whiz over this very quickly, were PlayStation 5 earbuds.
Yeah.
So they're bringing out their own earbuds now, as well as the 3D Pulse headset they've already got. I didn't really pay too much attention to this. It had a nice looking little case that it slotted into. I guess if you're well into the PlayStation world, they could be quite nice. I would like to think they can dual connect to other devices because you wouldn't want to just be using those on your PlayStation.
I think they did mention connect to your phone as well. I'm not sure if it was at the same time.
I watched it quite a few weeks back, that particular announcement separately, so I could tell you I wasn't paying too much attention.
Well,
but it's interesting.
It look at connect to different devices, which is good.
It's strange, isn't it? So you've got this portable but not really portable handheld gaming device, and then you've got a smaller, more compact, more portable version of the headphones they've already released, but they're not going to do you much good if you can't leave the house with the controller. So I don't know. It's a strange. I mean, I'm sure that they'll be nice to have, and I guess you can adorn yourself in your favorite gaming consoles. Very obvious headset, in terms of where it's come from. But I don't really understand what the driver for those is.
Yeah.
Although I will say, one of my favorite ever console accessories was on the 360, and it was the 360's wireless game chat headset adapter. And it was literally just it looked like a taxi driver's Bluetooth headset from back in the day. But I loved that thing, and I used it. I used the breaking point. That was one of the best accessories I had on the 360. So, if these act in a similar way, and you use your PlayStation enough, maybe there's a reason to get them.
Fair enough.
We'll fly through some of the other games that were announced, and then we'll kind of summarise it. So we saw Assassin's Creed Mirage that got a release date, but that's multi-console.
So much like Origin. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it does look like the...
I thought it looked more like the original Assassin's Creeds. I can see the Origin link, and I guess it's a similar kind of environment, isn't it? In terms
Very
of where
similar,
they're going. Yeah. But yeah, apparently it's smaller in scope this time. So it'll be a bit more compact, which will be interesting. I do like the Assassin's Creed series. I haven't yet played Odyssey. I'd like to play Valhalla. Yeah. I'm way behind on them. So I'm not going to be diving into it, but nice to see that series carrying on. And we'll talk about this on next week's episode, but they've also announced the VR version, haven't they, since? Which will so there's going to be a VR Assassin's Creed, which looks cool. Interesting. Although I can imagine that making you feel really sick.
Yeah, lots of movement.
Alan Wake 2 was also announced. Don't know if that's a console exclusive. I can't remember now, because there was a very clever tweet by Xbox at the end of the PlayStation Showcase, which then PlayStation copied at the end of the Xbox Showcase, which basically called out half the games that were announced here as also coming to Xbox, just to make very clear that they weren't exclusives, because they're not always clear. I can't remember if Alan Wake 2 was exclusive to PlayStation or was getting a release on both. But either way, that was announced and showcased. Final Fantasy 16 got a lot of praise for its new gritty tone, and apparently the playable demo, which was also released since, has gone down really well. So fingers crossed for a great...
I know a lot of people are excited about that.
Yeah, I think it looks really good. Do you know the name of the protagonist?
No. I've never played the series, so it's over my head.
Well, no, they changes. It's because Final Fantasy is a different story every time. So this is like, a medieval world. It's like dark, dragons, armor, fire, monsters, creatures, epic storylines. What kind of name might you expect your protagonist to have in a world like that, with a real sort of like massive scope for this huge tale? You can sense the sarcasm here, so you know where this is going. Yeah. It's not going to be a heroic name.
Yeah, you're going to have to tell me, is it like Keith or something?
It's not far off. It's Clive.
Clive, like it.
Genuinely, your protagonist, your hero in Final Fantasy 16 is called Clive, which did tickle me.
Well,
nothing wrong with that if you're a Clive.
It's a heroic name, yeah. You might be insulting our audience here.
Yeah. Yeah. If in that small number of listeners we have a Clive, I'm so sorry. But it's still funny. And also Keith, because you've just labelled Keith as also being a terribly boring name now. So if we've got a Keith as well, I apologise. We saw some other bits. So Dragon's Dogma got a new trailer. We also saw Bungie announce the new version of Marathon. So for those who don't know, Marathon was their Mac title back in the day.
Really?
Before they made Halo and then made Destiny, Marathon was a title I'm sure was developed for the Mac way back in the day. So they're bringing that back to life in all its glory. So yet another PvP shooter to look forward to. We saw a bit more around then things like Street Fighter.
Yep.
I'm flicking through here some random stuff. We did see then, don't know if you saw this or you noticed it. Did you see the foam stars?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
So, I mean, they couldn't have more blatantly ripped off Splatoon if they'd tried.
Yeah.
It's just a shooter where everyone shoots foam at each other instead of ink like in Splatoon.
I think it is is it not the same? No, it's not the
same.
No,
it's Square Enix this one's coming from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It looked pretty blatant to me, but that was also shown. It did look fun. I mean, I'm not really into that. Then there was a few good indie-looking titles, a few sort of Japanese hack and slashes. We got Ghost Runner 2 was announced. There was a very fun trailer for Helldivers 2. I quite like the trailer, although I'm not that bothered about the game.
I loved it. Starship Troopers is what it reminds me
I
of.
was going to say that was where my brain went when they started. I was like, this is going to be Starship Troopers.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got really excited, and then it wasn't Starship Troopers. But hey ho. And we had a Resident Evil 4 remake VR mode trailer, so everyone.
Yeah,
kind of
I'm
knew that was
excited. I'm
coming
actually
anyway.
playing Resident Evil 4 at the moment, so that'll be
Yeah.
next out.
I think people knew it was coming though. Not a massive surprise. There was some really interesting games with some really unique art styles, which I really liked. There was Cat Quest Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah,
it was quite good.
Show
That looked
Christina
quite
that
fun. I
shoes,
mean,
yeah.
they're not my kind of games, but I can appreciate the uniqueness of the art. I quite liked, I'm going to butcher this, Towers of Agasaba, which looked a bit Breath of the Wildy.
Yeah.
Very pretty, looked quite interesting.
It had city building vibes is what I wrote down. And also gives me Horizon Zero Dawn kind of landscape vibes, I think, that game.
Yeah, like, it's almost like rebuilding a world, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So there was a lot in there. There's not much else unless you had anything you particularly wanted to call out that I would sort of highlight. My one takeaway, to be honest, was there was a lot of trailers and not a lot of gameplay, generally speaking, across the show, which I think is a theme that a lot of people have kind of mentioned. So not an original piece of thought there from me, but having watched it back and having heard that feedback, I would agree that there was lots of fancy CGI trailers, but I didn't really get a feel for a lot of the games in terms of what I might want to expect when I'm playing it.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a bit of a problem because it's hard to get excited over all these kind of very similar feeling games that are trying to build new franchises and new IP when I don't really understand what the gameplay mechanics are going to look like.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what they're actually going to be like to play. Yeah. I agree.
All in all, I don't think there was anything that was a massive surprise in there. I think Metal Gear was meant to be one of the kind of standout wow announcements. And it was, it was certainly busy on my Twitter. But there wasn't much else really that got me excited other than Spiderman, which we talked about.
Yeah, I'd agree. Spiderman did look fantastic though.
It does.
And made me want to get a PS5.
Which I guess if it's if that's the impact it's having, it's doing its job, isn't it? It's
yeah, true.
That's what they're trying to drive you to. So let's then move on to the Xbox showcase.
Yeah.
Which I sat through, I think 1 hour and 40 odd minutes of. So I watched the Starfield full deep dive afterwards, which we can kind of briefly touch on here as well.
Yeah, you can touch on that because I missed that. I got up halfway and I intended to go back to finish it if I got time to watch it all beforehand, but I didn't, unfortunately. So
there was a huge amount of detail in there, but it was there was a lot you didn't kind of need to see really, unless you're interested in where it was going to go. So let's start with where they started this time then. So the Xbox kicked off with Richard Ayoade, which I really liked because I do love Richard Ayoade. And it was instantly obvious to me, at least, that was Fable, and very quickly they made that very obvious as well, because they're leaning into the British humour for Fable. And I really liked that kind of TV interview style. He was getting interviewed about the heroes, and then the hero breaks in, and then the next thing we're led to believe is that this hero has conquered him and defeated the giant Richard Ayoade, or Dave, I think he was named. I thought it looked really good. I did enjoy previous Fable games. I've played Fable 2 and Fable 3. Thought they were both very good. And I think Fable 1's probably arguably the best, and I never played that one. So, a good series there. Been gone for a long time.
I've never played them. Never played the Fables, but this looks a lot of fun. I'd actually like to give it a try.
So Fable 2 was really interesting at the time because it let you kind of choose your own path. So your character would change based on the good or the bad decisions that you made. So if you were playing the sort of mainline hero, you would look more and more heroic and almost glisten and glow, and your weapons would shine, and you were kind of the whiter than white hero. Whereas if you undertook some more sort of dastardly tasks, or you chose to kill someone instead of apprehending them or whatever it might be, then your character would slowly become slightly more demonic looking. And I remember I had this kind of jacked character by the end who got these like smallish horns, a bit of a red tint. It wasn't full on evil, but there was a little bit of evil in there.
Yeah,
it's quite interesting, and obviously everyone's journey is different. What I liked about the Fable trailer is that it did show some gameplay, even though I think a lot of people criticised it for not showing it, and the developers came out and went, no, that was gameplay.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, okay, cool. There was also not unexpected, I don't know the word I'm looking for, is there was the discourse around the looks of the protagonist and the woman not being pretty enough for the gaming world, and all the horrible crap that went around back when Horizon Zero Dawn was out and everyone was giving Aloy grief for not looking like the conventional pretty protagonist that we should all expect. That's
a weird
sexist rubbish. It's just awful. But again, same kind of rubbish got bandied around with this particular character because she wasn't, conventionally sort of sexy, I guess.
Well, just realistic.
It kind of makes me a bit sad for the industry that I love, that we've got people like that follow it, but unfortunately they're everywhere. So Fable looks good, and it was one of many where we got the coming to Game Pass, first to Game Pass.
Yeah, there was so many of those in this.
Yeah, really great for people who've got Game Pass. We had Keanu Reeves introducing the new add-on Phantom Liberty for Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah,
that was really cool, and obviously Idris Elba's going to star in that.
I saw Idris Elba's in it.
That's from what they're saying, this is a massive overhaul of the base game as well. It's changing a lot.
I thought it might be. I thought this might be like a bit of a relaunch almost for the game.
Definitely, that's kind of the vibe they're going for. And I think a lot of people who've played some of the early gameplay have said most of the changes are for the better. So I started it on stream months ago, and I've not gone back to it. It didn't really grip me.
Yeah.
I might be tempted to go and give it another try if they're going to kind of change it up a little bit and maybe start afresh. See whether it can catch me. We saw some footage for Avowed, which I know a lot of people are really interested in. Really bother me, but it looked very pretty. It's one of these mini games that I kind of haven't really had a chance to properly understand or get a look into.
Yeah, I wrote that I'd quite like to play that one. The notes I put was Assassin's Creed meets Skyrim with some kind of plague. The bear didn't have all those legions on it. That was really interesting. Then we got a really interesting announcement, which was the 1 terabyte Xbox Series S in black. Yes.
Which looked really cool. And my friend's got a Series S, and he's been really happy with it ever since he had it. He swears by it. He plays on a relatively sort of modest HD monitor. Doesn't need the 4K. Doesn't need any of that, but can play all the latest games and thoroughly enjoys that console and for what it cost. This one, I think it's $50 more than the 512. You get double the storage, which you absolutely need on an all-digital console. Yeah. And it looks pretty slick in black as well, which is nice. So if you haven't bought one already and you're looking, that might be an option for someone who's looking to get into Xbox. Then we got what everyone was expecting to be the big killer game, which they only showed a trailer for, but then there was the deep dive at the end, which was Starfield, which I have to say, I will say, it gets a lot of comparisons to No Man's Sky. I can completely understand why that is. There's a lot of parity between the mechanics, the way the game is sort of laid out. I think they are going to be quite different, and if it's as good as them hyping it up to be, it's going to be incredible to play. The amount of customization, if that's the sort of thing you like spending your time on, then wow, look really impressive. I know it's a game I will barely scratch the surface of, but I absolutely want to give it a go because it looks really exciting and interesting. There's far too much customization for me personally. I just wouldn't spend the time doing the stuff that you could do to the ship, to your gun, to the planets, to all that stuff. But it looks amazing. And if the story is compelling enough, I might be able to get through because I think it's big enough for an interesting world. My worry is that there's could be too much to do. So it needs a really compelling storyline to weave it all together for me to keep me interested in doing some of those side activities. If the narrative doesn't grip me, then I will, a bit like No Man's Sky, I enjoyed the exploration, but got bored fairly quickly because I didn't really understand the point of what I was doing. Yeah. I need an end game. What am I trying to do? So if Starfield's got that, could be amazing. What were your impression of the bits you saw?
Skyrim in space. It's
Skyrim in space. Yeah.
That's basically my notes. I mean, it looks amazing. It does look really, really good. 25 years in the making, they said. Some of the clips actually reminded me a little bit of Destiny. I couldn't tell you now why that I wrote that, but it did, I guess. I mean the scenery looked amazing. I didn't obviously get a good look at the gameplay or anything, but I know you did the deep dive afterwards.
Yeah, I mean the graphics looked amazing. The gameplay looked so varied. You've got sort of in-space combat, just normal in-space flight. You've got ground combat, ground exploration. You can customize every element of your ship and literally make it look like whatever you want it to look like and configure it to your heart's content. It just looked incredible from a kind of the amount of options that are in that toolkit. The visuals, they've gone for a real cinematic style, so it's like extreme and dramatic lighting effects.
Yeah.
Make these beautiful vistas. I'm interested in whether you saw the story that came out afterwards, where they confirmed it's been intentionally locked at 30 FPS.
No, I didn't see that, but I know you mentioned it to me in passing a while ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting.
Now they're saying it's a style choice, but I also think it's probably necessary to make all that other stuff work.
Which is surprising on hardware that's so powerful for the Xbox.
Well, they're saying it's a style choice, but who knows? You know, whether, maybe they'll bring a 60 FPS mode and you can choose. But if they're focusing on graphics and visuals over performance, apparently, which I can understand why they'd have to do for the game like this, the way it looks the way this does. But it'll be interesting to see whether it converts to kind of poor gameplay experience. I personally won't bother me in the slightest because, as we've said before, I'm not a guy who is particularly obsessed with the FPS stuff. I know that it's a bigger deal for you.
As long as the input, there isn't any lag with the input, it might still feel a little mushy when you're like playing and walking around and stuff. But I get that they're going for the cinematic quality, so maybe because they've done it on purpose, they've done a lot of other things to make it feel a bit smoother and more natural than, you know, if a game is running at 30 FPS and it's not intending to run at 30 FPS, you can feel it because it's like chugging along.
Yeah.
Whereas if they've done it intentionally, it might you know, feel a bit better.
The Gears trilogy would run at 60 in multiplayer, but 30 in the single player campaign or co-op campaign, and that was a style choice. They wanted 30 FPS because of the cinematic feel, but then they had 60 FPS for multiplayer. That's where people
makes sense because you need the fast movement,
which I really like that. They also announced at the same time some interesting accessories, of which I forgot to put mine close enough to me to be able to reach while recording this, but I did buy one of them. So they announced a Starfield controller.
Nice.
Which
did you get a Starfield controller?
Do you want me to go and get it?
I can't believe you got one already. It was only announced the other day.
Yeah.
You and your collectibles, Jay.
And I do like a collectible. So, sorry, I'm back. So this is the controller for those who want to see it. I don't know.
Oh, that does look cool.
So it's white. It's got some sort of interesting sort of decals that are meant to sort of align with the Starfield game. The sort of the color pattern around the Xbox button is the actual sort of logo for Starfield. What's most interesting, I think, is the back. So can you see the transparent triggers? I
can, yeah. They're like translucent ones, right?
Yeah, so you can see all the mechanisms and the motors running when they're running, which is really cool. So I think a lot of people assume this was going to come later, but it was announced and released for order on the day, so I just ordered it.
Nice.
And then it came like literally days later. They also announced a version of the Xbox headset that you can buy, which again is all very much in the same kind of look and feel and stylized to look like Starfield. I didn't bother with that. And then if you want for the collector's edition of the game, this is bonkers. They're doing a smartwatch. They're doing an actual smartwatch. Did you not see this?
No.
So that it comes in this really cool lockbox, like a really cool lockbox, which is the bit I'm more interested in than the watch, which is all from the game. So you get presented this communicator watch in the game, and then you can have a real one to wear. It's themed again around with the sort of look and feel of Starfield, and then it'll do your sort of notifications and stuff like that. It's not a full-on smartwatch in terms of some of the. I guess it's probably more like a kind of Fitbit level in terms of the kind of performance, the technology that's in it, and I mean the sort of step trackers, not the heart rate monitors and stuff like that. But still, you could that's the collectible pre-order that you can go after in the fancy box if you really want it.
You just made me think though. The game developers are missing a trick by not having, even apps on like, Apple Watch or Samsung watches that could just, play with the game. I wonder why they haven't done something like that. That seems like a bit of an obvious thing to do. Things like that have been
done in the past, and they just, I don't think. So do you remember the Red Dead Redemption live map that you could get? So on the iPad, you could download the Red Dead Redemption app, and you could run so instead of having the little map in the corner on the game, you could push it to a separate device. And you could basically have your entire iPad would be the map of Red Dead Redemption. It would show you where you were going and what you were doing. Yeah, it's really cool. I did use it. And it would show you like your waypoints and where you had to travel. And
that's a great idea. More games should do that. I think that's a really good idea.
You don't see much of it. And I know back in the day when GTA 5 first came out, there was a mobile app for that, which kind of complemented the game, and you could set your number plates and stuff up in it. But there was so much wrong with that game when it first launched. Literally nothing worked.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I do remember actually Rust on the PC. You could set up a separate window or a separate like web page that would have the map up and where you are in the map, and you log in and it gives you all the locations and all the different spots on there. I love that sort of stuff. I think it's a really good way of making the game feel a bit more immersive. Like you've got all these different devices.
No, I completely agree. Together. I mean, you could imagine how cool that would be to have an app on the iPad for Starfield where you could navigate the galaxy and zoom in where you wanted to travel, and then push a button on the iPad and your game would just teleport you off in your ship.
Love that.
It'd be really cool. Yeah.
Or combo with the Apple Vision Pro, where maybe you play in the play in the game and then you've got some overlays
accessory to be able to enjoy that experience though.
Yeah. True.
The other thing I was going to mention with this as well, which I haven't done yet because I've yet to connect it to my console, is there's a theme that is unique to the controller that only appears on the console when you connect this controller. So it unlocks a Starfield theme that you can have on your Xbox. It's quite cool.
Nice.
Just conscious of time, so we'll just fly through some of the other bits that were announced at Xbox. So we had the first look at Star Wars Outlaws, which is the Ubisoft game coming next year, which was deep dived on Ubisoft's showcase. We had the announcement of Forza Motorsport coming later this year.
Just quickly on Star Wars, I heard that it's a bit more open worldy, and it even has things like GTA mechanics, like the police mechanics. You know, if you start to do.
I honestly haven't looked at it in any detail. So
that's the only thing I've heard about it, is it has the GTA police mechanics. So if you start to do things wrong, you'll get like a star or something, or it'll go increase in how much the police want you. So it makes me think that there might be a bit more of an open world kind of feel to it, which sounds cool.
That does sound good. Obviously, that's not unique to the Xbox either. Worth calling out, that's multi-console and PC, but shown here for the first time. And that's often the way with these showcases. There was things in PlayStation that weren't unique to PlayStation, and things in Xbox that weren't unique to Xbox, so on. So Forza, it's coming to Game Pass. Looks really good if you're into that kind of thing. I'm not that bothered personally, but I know it's a really popular series. In Exile announced Clockwork Revolution, which is coming to Game Pass, which is not unique to Xbox, I don't think. But it looks a lot like BioShock Infinite, and it's got a lot of stick for that as well, and there's some possible lawsuit brewing, I think, for that one, but it'd be interesting to see if that goes anywhere.
Really?
Yeah.
I like the look of that one. I thought that looked quite cool. The kind of steampunky...
yeah, it was too similar to BioShock Infinite, to the point when I was watching the trailer thinking, oh, this is a sequel to BioShock Infinite, and then it came up with what it was, and I was like, oh no, that's nothing to do with BioShock Infinite. Again, too many games to mention here. Lots of stuff coming to Game Pass, which was great. We saw Payday 3 gameplay, which was quite cool. Yeah. Again, that's coming to Game Pass. Won't be an exclusive. We saw a couple of Persona releases. This one I particularly liked was Sea of Thieves, the Monkey Island crossover.
I saw that. I thought you would like that one.
Really cool. I do like Sea of Thieves. It's one of those games that I don't get to play enough because it only really works when you've got a group of friends to play it with. We should absolutely do that on stream, by the way.
Yeah, I'm up for it. Well up for it.
But you need even two of us. It wouldn't be the same fun. Like when I've played that game in the past, genuinely still say that one of the best ever online game experiences I ever had with friends and randoms was on Sea of Thieves.
Yeah,
and it was when we went after the Megalodon when it first launched. It was like this expedition you could go on, and it was just so much fun. Best few hours of online gaming I'd done in a long time.
Yeah.
We also saw Microsoft's new flight simulator, which was announced. So
with new like
really
mission
cool
style things, so you could do like aerial firefighting and rescue helicopters.
It started really cool, didn't it? And then it was like do freight delivery, and you're like, oh, that doesn't seem quite as much fun. But
turning into Death Stranding.
If it gives you a purpose, I suppose why not?
Oh, I did see something really cool about it though. It was the Dune Dragonfly. You got to fly
that's for the current flight sim, isn't it? Oh no, that's also current flight simulators getting the Dune crossover this year. What they demoed was Flight Sim 2024, which was mission.
Oh, so they must have just announced that like straight after.
Yeah,
but that did look amazing. That
does look good. We had Senua's Saga, so the Hellblade 2, which is an Xbox exclusive, so that's coming next year, and that'll be Game Pass as well. We saw the first look at Like a Dragon, which was quite funny, which was the main character washing up on a beach naked.
Yeah,
everyone like reacting badly to him, which is quite funny. There was a few expansions, Fallout, one of them, a few other sort of indie sequels. Elder Scrolls, the online Shadow of Morrowind, that looked quite cool. I quite like that trailer until it said it was Elder Scrolls Online, and I was like, oh, that's passed me by already, which is a shame. City Skylines 2 coming straight to Game Pass later this year. That was really good.
That looks really good. I'm not a city builder builder kind of person, but I know people who are, and they would absolutely love that.
Oh, I used to love them back in the day when I had the time. Like I'd love to sit and play it. I'd love to sit and have the time to play it, but it's hours of investment, isn't it? That's the problem. And that was it really for Xbox. There was, like I said, what struck me was the amount of quality. I definitely thought this was a really good showcase for Xbox. They needed it because they've had a bad 6 months. But there was some really great stuff in there, and the amount of stuff coming to Game Pass just further loading value onto that service. I thought it was great. Really, really, really pleased. And for me, better than the PlayStation 1. And I've got a foot in both camps, so I'm not biased in any way. But I definitely felt like the Xbox showcase was, I would say, far stronger than PlayStation this time, which is very unusual.
I'd agree. I think the games that were announced were much better, I think. And also, there was a lot of emphasis on them being available on Game Pass, so really rewarding their current users for staying on the Xbox side, which I didn't feel a lot of. I think on the PlayStation side, it was more, these are our games, you have to come to us if you want to play them. Whereas Xbox was like, we're giving all our members all this good stuff. Come and join us kind of thing.
So, I'm conscious of time, so shall we move swiftly on to Summer Game Fest and kind of rattle through some of the announcements there? Now, I know that neither one of us has seen this in full, but I'll try and give you the rundown from the stuff that I've heard and the stuff that I've managed to watch. So, one of the big things that they showed, so first of all, this was the live event. Nicolas Cage was on stage at one point because he's now a playable character in Dead by Daylight. So, he's one of the survivors that you can play as in Dead by Daylight coming soon. Did not know that. So, he came on stage. That was quite cool. This was a bit of an odd one because obviously it's not aligned with either mainline console manufacturer. Yeah, and they've got stuff. They've kind of got stuff from everywhere. I got the feel that the stuff here wasn't that big a deal. So the big thing that they kind of teased at the end, which was the "you don't want to miss this," was genuinely good, and probably should have been at the PlayStation showcase, which was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So part 2 of the remake. Yeah. That got a trailer. It's coming out next year. And one of the big things that sort of tickled everyone is that it said 2 discs, which is kind of a subtle nod back to Final Fantasies of old, which used to be 3 or 4 discs, depending on which version you look at. So this is so big it's coming on 2 discs. It looked huge. It graphically looked incredible. I haven't even sat and played the first part of the remake, but I really want to. Maybe I'll do it on stream at some point. And I'm certainly keen to sort of see where this goes in the sequel. But it looked amazing. But that was their one more thing. That was the thing they did right at the very end. Okay. So that kind of gives you the context for everything that went in the middle, because as big as that is, it's not a new story. We knew this was coming. All it's done is given us a date, which is next year. So, pretty cool. Spiderman 2 got another look in. I think they had announced the release date at Summer Game Fest, so they hadn't announced that. At PlayStation Showcase a few weeks later, they put a release date on it. It's because some of this stuff is paid exclusives. They save it specifically for Game Fest. It's a fairly new event. It's only been around a couple of years. It was conceived through COVID when E3 went to the wall. And then it's become a live event now, almost replacing E3. Quite an interesting sort of story there. So Spider-Man 2 got a release date, which is the 20th of October, but nothing else new. They opened with something that got a lot of stick, but I actually thought it looked quite cool, which was Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, which is to return to the side-scrolling style approach of Prince of Persia, but incorporating faster kind of combat styles from the newer games. I think it looked pretty good. They got a lot of stick because the last thing they announced, that Ubisoft announced for Prince of Persia, was the remake of The Sands of Time, which looked really crap. And it had a release date. It was meant to be this year. It's got pushed back indefinitely, and it's nowhere to be seen at the moment, so it may well be cancelled altogether. Yeah. But this is the latest kind of play to use that franchise. It looks quite cool. It's got a particular art style they've gone for. Looks fast, fluid. I personally thought it looked interesting. There was a lot of kind of negativity around it.
I really liked the original. I was a really big fan of the original Prince of Persia, the side-scrolling one. I thought it was quite a fun game. Yeah,
I like that as well. Then they also announced they showed, extensive gameplay of Mortal Kombat 1, which is so confusing from a game title again. But it looks really interesting. The visuals look really great. So they showed some of the bone crunching fatalities. It looks really good. I really like the look of that.
So what is it then? The Mortal Kombat 1?
The next in the series. Gone from Mortal Kombat 11 to Mortal Kombat 1. I think it's I don't know if it's like a kind of an Origins-y sort of tale, and they're going to kind of restart some of that franchise. I don't know.
Okay.
Plenty of characters in there, and all the kind of gory stuff you're used to, over the top gory finales. I haven't played properly.
Yeah, we should play some of these games, I think, on stream.
Well, I was saying to you the day that off stream we should do Final Fantasy. Sorry, not Final Fantasy. Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
Again, that's reviewed really well. Mortal Kombat, I'd love to have a go at. I think we should absolutely go back and do some Smash on stream as well.
Smash Brothers,
that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, there's definitely some fun, some mileage there to be had. Fortnite announced Chapter 4, Season 3, which is called Fortnite Wilds, and Optimus Prime is one of your new skin options. So you can have a dancing robot if you want, which I'm not a big fan of the Transformers personally, but, quite cool if you are. Sonic got a new 2D art style, so a new 2D release, traditional style Sonic, but with a new sort of refined art style, so making him look modern but keeping to the traditional gameplay, which could be good.
As in, is it the original like levels and everything as well? It's just like a reboot with a new art style?
I don't know whether they were that specific. No, it can't, because there's different characters in it.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a 3D art style but done in a 2D appearance. No, it doesn't say. It's out this autumn, so we'll find out, but it doesn't specify. I don't think it was. They did show some side by side of levels that look similar, so whether there's some similar environments in there.
Yeah.
But it was very much kind of meant to showcase this new style. There's more Alan Wake 2, so they did a big gameplay reveal, but of course we'd already knew about it from the PlayStation event.
Yeah.
The Like a Dragon got more. Again, it was announced that was coming later this year.
Was there more of a trailer? Because I think the trailer that they did for the Xbox One, it could have been any kind of game. I have no idea what it's about.
Yeah, have you not played the Yakuza games? I've not played them either, but they're kind of like a bit,
but like GTA.
A bit GTA, but more comedy, and yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
We had Star Trek Infinite was announced as a strategy game. Not really for me personally. Not a Trekkie, but some people might find that one compelling. That's
I think I've got friends who would be into that. I haven't really been.
So a full reveal is coming, or has been and gone, in fact, on June 16th. So there should be more information around on that. We had Toxic Commando was revealed. John Carpenter's Toxic Commando, so a new first-person shooter as an ode to the 80s action horror genre.
Ooh, that sounds cool. I like John Carpenter.
Yeah, it could be interesting. I didn't see that trailer, to be honest. We had a number of kind of sort of, again, releases that don't really sort of tick my boxes. There was a Lord of the Rings Return to Moria, which is coming later this year. But I've got to be honest, off the back of the really poor reception of Gollum, slightly concerned that Lord of the Rings is getting milked a little bit and not getting good quality. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame. There again, there's just titles here that for me didn't really stack up as being as compelling as the stuff that was coming on the Xbox and PlayStation showcases. Baldur's Gate 3 introduced some new characters. Twisted Metal debuted its some new footage of the clown character Sweet Tooth fighting Anthony Mackie. So that was an interesting trailer that did the rounds, but that's not even for a game. It's for a TV spin-off from a game. We talked about Twisted Metal a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, yeah, of course.
And then we had an update to Marvel Snap, which is a mobile game. Some new trailers for Season 4 of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Which I'm so confused by now. I'm so confused to where that franchise is at.
Is that online? Because I thought it was only campaign that they released.
So it says we got a fresh look at the upcoming season for Modern Warfare 2, but don't forget, we had Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 from back in the day, but then they rebooted Modern Warfare as a title for the newer games, as well as bringing back Modern Warfare remasters.
Yeah, so they did the remake for Modern Warfare 2 campaign, right? Yeah,
but this isn't that. This is the. That's what I'm saying. It's so confusing now.
Okay,
I'm massively out of touch with Call of Duty, to be honest.
Me too.
Path of Exile 2 got gameplay trailers. Exo Primal, which I think we talked about when we did the Capcom release. Do you remember the one that was dinosaurs and mechs? And we watched it on the Capcom reveal back when we did the reactions to that a couple of months back now.
I think so, yeah.
this is a crossover with Street Fighter. You're going to have like robotic Ryu will be in the game, so you can fight dinosaurs with robotic Ryu or Ryu, whatever you prefer to say.
Okay.
Lies of P got a demo, which is a horror game that was released like kind of on the day. They showed a trailer for Witcher 3 season 3, which will be the last season with Henry Cavill. Which is a shame before he gets replaced.
Yeah, that is a shame.
Massive shame. So I really enjoy that show.
Me too.
Don't know where that'll end up going. Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 revealed a co-op mode. Like I said, it was a bit, lots of stuff in there.
All over the place.
Disjointed.
Sounds like.
Yeah, a bit disjointed. I mean, I'm flicking through the last stuff here. There's just loads of games. There's some new stuff in there that looks interesting. So, don't get me wrong. There was lots to unpack, but certainly nothing on the scale of what we saw with the Xbox or PlayStation showcase. And there was one critical piece of feedback or criticism that the event got online, which is really unfortunate. But basically, there was no female representation on stage throughout the entire event.
Yeah.
Now with PlayStation, it was just Jim Ryan, start and finish, and everything else was just trailers. Xbox had female members of their developer team, senior members of the team, involved in the talking to camera pieces. So like plenty of diversity on display there. Unfortunately, Summer Game Fest didn't achieve that, with absolutely zero women involved in the presentations, which is just feels like in this day and age a real like oversight and kind of cock up on their part. It's such an unfortunate thing to have the event called out for.
Yeah.
It's such an essential thing that you've just got to be much more considerate of in like the modern day. You just can't afford to miss that kind of stuff now. And it's unfortunate then because all of the kind of the women in the crowd or watching at home, don't feel like welcome or represented in the way that they should be in this modern era. So
not considerate of the audience, and there's a massive audience of female gamers as well now.
And it massively overshadowed the event, to be honest, because it became one of the key talking points on Twitter, which is a real shame because what they're trying to do here is great because with the absence of E3 now, which doesn't look like that's necessarily going to change anytime soon, Summer Game Fest is possibly that one in-person event that could become something really compelling. It's the same organisers that do the Game Awards at the end of every year.
Yeah,
it's Jeff Keighley and his team. So it could be something really compelling to cock up on something like that, which is so easy to avoid these days as well. It should be one of the first considerations really is have we got the right balance here from a diversity perspective? Are we being representative of our community? To mess that up just feels like such a misstep.
I think it's going to be so to correct it now at future events. It's just going to look too obvious now, isn't it? I think everyone's going to call it out for being a bit fake or.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought Summer Game Fest was okay. I'd heard that generally I think the reception was slightly better than PlayStation's. For me, on watching it, I didn't find it quite as compelling. I thought that if I was going to rank them, I'm conscious of bringing this to a reasonable close for this week's episode, I would probably go Xbox first. In fact, I would 100% put Xbox first. And then PlayStation and Game Fest are fairly tight, but I would have put PlayStation probably second for me, just because of the interesting, if not necessarily required, hardware announcements, which just intrigues me. And then Game Fest, I just felt was a little bit of a mismatch, I think. And that's a problem, I think, when you're trying to juggle so many different kind of consoles, and also you're not necessarily going to get the best exclusives because, of course, Xbox and PlayStation are 100% going to want those on their shows. So they get the scraps, it felt like a little bit to me.
Yeah.
All the stuff that's perhaps like DLC or a release date where actually we kind of, it wasn't new releases, just extra information about things we knew about. I'd liked the fact that it was live. There was a nice energy to the room because of it. It felt a bit more fun. But in terms of content, I don't think it stood up for me. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Xbox definitely stole the show for me. And I've always been on the PlayStation camp more than anything, just because I really like the new console. If I was going to get the new console, it would have been the PlayStation, but now I'm leaning more towards the Xbox just because the games look really quite good, and the Game Pass is really quite a compelling reason to get into the Xbox ecosystem, I think, at the moment as well. But yeah, the announcements definitely won over PlayStation. I didn't watch the Summer Game Fest, but from the sounds of it, not a lot of new games, a lot of kind of extra information on things that may have already been announced at the other consoles and things like that. There's a few things in there that I might have been interested in that you might not have passed your threshold of what type of games you'd like. So I might give it a watch, and I might be surprised by some of the games in there. But it sounds like, it also didn't kind of hit the mark, I think, compared to Xbox.
Yeah, I think so. Which, it's a shame. But I guess there's got to be a winner. They can't all be amazing. As much as I would love that as a gamer to have, multiple amazing game shows. There's not enough time to play half the games that come out these days.
Yeah.
And what I did like, and one of the things that struck me a bit more about PlayStations perhaps than Xbox, is I thought there was quite a lot of diversity in the games.
Yeah.
And I mean that from style perspectives, the gameplay types, but also perhaps who the audience is targeting.
Yeah.
So accepting that a lot of those games aren't necessarily intended for me. I'm not their primary audience anymore, and I get that. So it is difficult to get too critical, because I'm sure there's lots of things in there that will, as you say, pass me by.
Yeah.
But other people are going, that's really interesting. There's probably stuff in there that my wife would love, my kids will go on to love.
Yeah.
But just because of what I've kind of been raised on, the things I'm interested in, and my growing love of nostalgia as I get older, I don't know. There's just some of that stuff that perhaps didn't do it for me, but would probably entice others. And that's absolutely fine. That's exactly as it should be.
Yeah.
It's that variety, isn't it? So, okay. Well, we'll kind of bring it to a close there. Next week we are going to be unpacking the Meta event, which is now a few weeks old, but we've not had a chance to properly get into that yet, as well as the PC gaming showcase, which is more Robbie's world than mine, as I'm not a PC gamer. But we're going to have a look at those and anything else we think that kind of falls into that bucket, as there are other showcases that we've kind of left out. Ubisoft, Capcom, and others. We might do maybe a sweeping summary of those as well if we get a chance. But that's our review of Summer Game Fest and PlayStation and Xbox's showcases. Let us know what you thought down in the comments if you're watching us on YouTube. Please do like and subscribe and all the good stuff that we need you to do over there to help share the show with others who might find this as interesting. If you're into the podcast and you prefer that, then please do make sure that you are following us on your preferred podcast service. Leave a review if you can, because that really helps us as well. And otherwise, we will see you again for episode 23.